My mother's name was Silo Oren. She served as Earth's senior trade envoy to the Drayven Compact for 11 years, and the Compact's registry lists her final status as credential withdrawal, voluntary, confirmed. She did not withdraw her credentials. She disappeared inside a Compact transfer facility on the 6th day of what they called a routine administrative review, and she never came out the other side. I have the transfer logs. I have the facility manifest. I have her last filed dispatch, sent 4 hours before she went in, asking us to be patient. I was 26 years old. I am 31 now. I mention this only to be precise about the timeline, because the timeline is what mattered in the end. The Compact called the hearing a formality. That was the word the senior registrar, Factor Chief Sovun Dereth, used when the gallery took its seats, a formality. Earth's integration registry entry had been open for 5 years. It had been stamped, certified, and countersigned by 3 separate Compact instrumentalities. The only remaining step, Dereth explained in the measured cadence of a man who had never once been wrong, was public confirmation. The reading of the entry into permanent record, before witnesses, under the Compact's charter of sovereign instrument. I sat in the 4th row of the observer's gallery. I had come as a registered civilian observer, trade affiliation, no diplomatic standing. No one in the chamber knew who I was. I wanted it that way. The chamber was not large. The Drayven Compact did not go in for spectacle. Its power was in its paperwork, and the room reflected that preference. Long tables of pale polished stone, the Compact seal pressed into the surface in dark inlay. Factor chairs arranged in 2 facing arcs. Soft indirect lighting that made everything look like an official record already. The gallery above the main floor held perhaps 30 seats. Maybe 20 were occupied. A handful of accredited observers, a pair of Compact administrative clerks, and me. The human delegation seat was occupied by a single attaché I did not know. She had been assigned to the Compact mission 3 months earlier, after the previous lead was recalled. Recalled by whom, and on what authority, the Compact had not inquired too carefully, because the Compact assumed it controlled the answer. She was perhaps 40, dark coat, no insignia I recognized, seated at the far end of the table with a document folder closed in front of her. She had not spoken when the session opened. She did not speak when Dereth read the procedural preamble. She sat with her hands resting on the folder and watched the ceiling. Dereth read the entry. Earth designation Sol 3, inhabited sovereign world, formerly classified autonomous trade partner, reclassified integrated dependency, class 4, pursuant to Charter Article 77, subsection 12, effective date the 14th of the Compact's 7th administrative cycle. He paused. Entry sealed and confirmed. Countersignature of record. The office of the senior factor of the integration division. He looked up. For the benefit of the gallery and the permanent instrument, the entry is now being read into public record. All parties present are witnesses. Are there objections? He said it the way a person says a word they have said 1,000 times, not a question, a rhythm. The human attaché placed one hand on the document folder and opened it. She removed a single sheaf of pages, set them on the table in front of her, and pressed one palm flat on top. Then she said nothing. Dereth waited 2 seconds. The record will reflect no objection. The record will reflect, one of the Compact's administrative clerks said, voice dropping, that the party is presenting a document. Dereth looked at the attaché. You are out of order. This is a confirmation hearing, not. She pushed the document across the table toward the nearest Compact clerk without lifting her eyes from the ceiling. The clerk took it. Read the first page. Turn to the second. Set it down and turned to Dereth. And the clerk's face did what faces do when the ground moves without warning. Not panic, not comprehension, just a brief, careful stillness while the mind caught up to what the eyes had already processed. Then the clerk said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. I knew what the document was. I had been told 3 weeks earlier in a single short message from an address I did not recognize that would be presented at this hearing. The message had contained 2 sentences. The first told me to attend. The second told me what I would see. I had asked no questions because the address had been one my mother used for certain communications that she did not want on the Compact's transit logs. 14 months before the absorption entry was stamped, Earth's diplomatic registration, the legal entity that had signed the original autonomous trade partner framework, the entity the Compact needed as the subject of its integration instrument, had been dissolved. It had been dissolved quietly, through a third-party instrument filed in a jurisdiction the Compact did not monitor, and simultaneously reconstituted under a different registration number in a space outside Compact charter reach. The dissolution was dated and witnessed. The new registration was dated and witnessed. The chain of custody was clean. The Compact had stamped its integration entry against a legal entity that had ceased to exist 14 months earlier. The entity it had absorbed was an empty shell, still registered in the Compact's own transit databases because no one had thought to look, because why would they? The Compact's registry had told them what they wanted to know, and they had believed it. The entry was not void by the attaché objection. The entry was void because of its own internal instrument. The Compact's Charter of Sovereign Integration requires that an absorption entry be filed against a valid, active, continuously registered diplomatic entity. The dissolution record, now entered into the public record of this hearing as an exhibit, established that no such entity had existed at the time of filing. The absorption had no legal subject. The Compact's Integration Division had countersigned a document that absorbed a ghost. Drayven asked for a recess. The recess was granted. The recess ran for 4 hours. No one in the gallery left. We sat in the indirect light of the Compact's preferred administrative aesthetic and waited. And the waiting had the particular quality of a room in which everyone present already understood the outcome, but no one was willing to be the first to name it. When the chamber reconvened, the human attaché was not there. She had collected her folder. The exhibit copies had already been entered and left during the break. No statement. No formal guidroe. She simply was not in her chair when the session resumed, and no one asked where she had gone because everyone in the room had spent 4 hours reading the dissolution instrument and understood that there was nothing left to ask her. The Compact's legal review panel sat at the long table for a further 2 hours. I watched from the gallery. I watched Drayven sit with his hands flat on the seal-inlaid stone and stare at a point somewhere between the table's surface and the floor. I watched 2 of the factor chairs quietly gather their materials and leave before the panel formally adjourned. I watched a clerk pull up the original integration entry in the Compact's own registry system and stare at the counter-signature field for a long time. The entry was not removed that day. It sat in the Compact's registry, stamped and sealed and fully confirmed, absorbing a diplomatic entity that had not existed for 14 months before it was written. A perfect record, a flawless administrative instrument, a fact that had never been true. I thought about my mother during those 2 hours. I thought about the timeline she had built and what it had cost to build it. She had filed the dissolution instrument 8 weeks before her final trip to the transfer facility. She had done it quietly, through channels that left no trace on the Compact's transit logs, in a window when the Compact believed the integration process was moving smoothly and there was nothing to watch for. She had gone into that facility knowing what was in the pipeline and what it would require of her to keep it undisturbed. She had asked us to be patient. The dissolution instrument had been notarized by 2 witnesses whose names I did not know. The reconstitution filing had been completed by a third-party legal instrument registered in a jurisdiction the Compact did not monitor. Both had sat quietly in their respective records for 14 months, waiting for a Compact clerk to pick up a document in a confirmation hearing and turn to the second page. She had bought the window. She had bought it with 11 years of patient work and then with everything she had left. The window held. I did not say anything when the panel adjourned without ruling. I did not say anything when Drayven stood, slowly, and gathered his materials and left the chamber without looking at the gallery. There was nothing for me to say. I flew back 2 days later. I filed my civilian observer report through the standard registry channel. The report noted that I had attended the hearing, that a document had been entered into evidence, and that the session had adjourned without a confirmation ruling. The Compact sent no follow-up communication to Earth's trade mission for 63 days. On the 64th day, they requested a meeting. The meeting was to be held at an address of Earth's choosing. We chose an address outside Compact space. They came.